Hi, and welcome to the 19th episode of Season 2 of SteamLUG Cast. My name is Cheese, and with me I have Dorita.
Hello.
And special guest, Levi Bard from Unity Technologies.
Hey.
Welcome. So, before we dive in, might just have a quick recap of some of the things we've been playing lately. Dorita, what have you been up to?
I have been playing Strive, the new MOBA from the guys what made Heroes of New Earth. And at first I didn't really like it, but it's a bit of a grower. And if you people want to sign up, I have a referral key for you. You get a bit of in-game points, and I get a bit of in-game points, and it's all for benefit of everybody. But it's quite fun. If Dota is too hard for you, you should totally try that out if you're interested in the genre.
Neat.
So, the next game I've played was Among the Sleep, which I have finally finished, and it is extremely short for the price tag. But the ending was really pointed, so if you play games for really good pointed endings, it's a good game. If you play it for fleshed out, meaty gameplay and depth, it's not a good game. And I've also mostly finished Antichamber, but it's all about tying up loose ends in the end, which means you have to find the special stuff you can do, or the way you can exit some of the rooms. There are a few left, and at this point it gets tedious to really do the rest of it. But it was a really good puzzler until that point.
Yeah, right.
I've also played another puzzler, Hexcells, and the first sequel, Hexcells Plus, and that is seriously the best spin on, you could even say spin on Minesweeper that's out there. After LinuxZen or NG or however he calls himself this week suggested it last week, I grabbed it, and it's extremely good if you like puzzle games.
Yeah, I've got it too. I just haven't had a chance to check it out yet.
Yeah, you can really get some quick puzzles in here and there. You really don't need to take your time to play it. Just doing one of them and doing one of them without mistake is hard enough, but still doesn't take that long. And next up, I've started Shadowrun Dragonfall Director's Cut, the standalone game. And well, so far it's the same game I've played before. I haven't seen any of the new content yet, but I haven't actually played the DLC version that much before. I'm already further in than I was in the DLC. And last but by no means least, I have put 3 hours already into Wasteland 2, which just came out. And I can't even say anything about it yet because I know I've barely touched the surface. So, what have you been up to, Cheese?
Well, it's been one of those fortnights. I've
Tell me about
it. I've been playing Another World, which I'll probably talk about a little bit later. I've been playing some space-based DF9. I've been playing Bosun X. Had my eye on that for ages, but only just got around to picking it up, and it's pretty sweet. I've been testing Space Run, which is this kind of interesting tower defense-ish spaceship building game, except you build the ship while you're en route to your destination and being attacked by pirates, which is fun. Hack and Slash got released, so I've been playing through some of that. I've made it through the main accessible part of the storyline. I think that there's a lot more content that you can discover by ripping the game open and doing some stuff. Like I think there's a whole extra act that you can get access to, so that's kind of neat. And I managed to finish off Thinking with Time Machine and Mark of the Ninja. Oh yeah, and Stranded. Stranded is another. It's kind of like Among the Sleep, as you were saying that it has that kind of. It's very short, has a fairly powerful ending. It's this really minimalist point and click adventure that that depicts a lone survivor of a spaceship crash on a planet who the only thing you can really do is explore around and look at stuff, and well you can't even look at it. You can explore around and take in the environment. But I found the story was really nicely paced and really well constructed, so it's kind of cool. And Levi, what have you been playing lately?
Well, this week I've been playing Night Squad and Gang Beasts since they just launched on early access, and we have kind of this setup with like a big projector and a bunch of controllers, so those are really cool for that.
Yeah, nice.
I was actually surprised by Night Squad. Like if you just look at the Steam page, like it looks like a really simple kind of set of mini games sort of thing, but it's really more like it's really like a first person tournament style kind of thing. Like you've got Capture the Flag and you've got Domination, you've got all these like different game modes where you have to employ strategies and different things. So I was actually kind of impressed.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, Gang Beasts is basically the silliest game imaginable. It's like you're a bunch of drunken Play-Doh figures like duking it out for supreme mastery.
It looks pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Like we had someone stop by when we were playing it, and she said, "This game just looks stupid." And we're like, "Yeah, that's the appeal. That's the fun." So it was great. And also, we've been playing Untitled Cactus, which is awesome for just 4 people sitting around and like blasting everything, and Broforce, which is just total madness.
So you've been playing a bit of Assault Android Cactus lately, right?
Yeah, it's one of my favorites for when we have a bunch of people together, because it's casual just to jump in, jump out, and like the controls are very straightforward, but it's still super fun.
It's like this sort of accessible version of a bullet hell game.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is like the only parts that are strictly bullet hell are like the bosses, where you have like the bullet hell like kind of pattern thing where you have to stand in the right places and move exactly the right way and all that stuff. Like the rest of the levels is just crazy running and trying not to die.
I caught a glimpse of the upcoming boss, Venom, a few days back.
Oh, really?
And it's huge. Absolutely huge.
Awesome. I still haven't beaten Justice, actually.
I think, Vespula is the boss that I struggle most with at the moment. I just find her ground attacks to be really hard to predict and avoid. And then the swarms, of course, are kind of hard to deal with. But, it's all down to practice, I think. The thing I really like about Assault Android Cactus is the way that they've managed to put, big variances in gameplay between the characters. Like, it doesn't feel like you just got a different skin. You've got, like, a whole different game there under the hood.
Yes, totally. It has to change the way that you play. Like, I tend to play Coral, for example. And so, actually, Vespula is not that bad, because I really make a lot of use of like the force shield kind of secondary fire, and that's really nice against the swarms.
I mostly play as Starch. Her beam weapon does more damage when you're closer than when you're further away, so you just find you end up charging everyone, kind of like a lance, I guess. And that's kind of fun gameplay, but it doesn't really translate well to those swarms.
Yeah, I guess not.
But so before we go into our normal show content, we might have a bit of a chat with you about the stuff that you do and that sort of thing. So do you want to open by just giving us a little bit of information about yourself and what you're up to these days?
Sure. My name's Levi Bard. I'm kind of the lead Linux platform developer, maintainer here at Unity Technologies. I don't really know what else to say.
So, to follow up on that, you weren't the lead on Linux before, because if I remember correctly, you and Natasha did the Linux port in your free time, and it wasn't officially on the roadmap for quite some time, when you were already working at Unity, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I started out on the scripting team, which is dealing with our integration with Mono and how things happen in the background, like when you write a script, when you have different components and stuff like that. And I actually still do a lot of scripting work as well as my Linux stuff.
And what are you up to at the time on the Linux front? What can you talk about?
Well, we have some cool stuff coming for 5.0. Like, we reworked a lot of the gamepad support, for example, for Unity 5. And so we have we'll support the SDL style kind of controller mapping thing, which means any mapping that you have like in Steam Big Picture gets handed over to Unity games automatically, as well as having default mappings for basically all of the controllers we can find. That's one big thing.
Did you get enough of a response to the the call for configurations that you put out a while back?
I got a lot of +1s, but I think I only ended up getting 2 or 3 actual controller configs.
Yeah, okay. And it's did I rewrite in that it's going to be supporting the SDL2 format?
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah, sweet. So there'll be a lot of existing configurations there that you'll be able to take advantage of, I imagine.
Yeah, it should be. And like I said, anything that you've configured in Steam Big Picture, whether or not we know about it or SDL knows about it, Steam will just hand that across to us.
So at what point did you decide that you wanted to start doing work on bringing Unity across to Linux?
Well, I've always been like a Linux user and developer pretty much since the start of my development career. And so when I started at Unity, like one of the first things I asked was, well, why don't we have Linux support? Are we planning it? Like, what's the deal? And the answer was kind of, well, yeah, some of us talked about it, but we're not sure. And so we have this deal, Fridays are for fun, which is kind of like Google's 20% do what you want time, essentially. So you can work on whatever crazy thing that you think would be good. And so myself and Natasha and a couple of other folks like started using our Fridays like to port Unity over to Linux to get everything running, to make sure everything worked, stuff like that. And eventually, so another thing we have is periodically, like a couple times a year, we have like this hack week where all of our developers come from whatever office they're in and they meet in one place, and we spend a week just hacking on random crazy like projects. I guess it's a bit like the Amnesia Fortnite thing. But so like during one of these hack weeks, we took the Linux player that we had already worked on like during Fridays, and we ran it through all of our test suites, and we did we ported Rochard for Linux, and like we basically did a presentation like, this is the state of Unity on Linux today. And like it turned out like David and some of the other people who like make the decisions were impressed enough by that it became a thing that we should go forward and actually ship it.
That's cool. And Rochard had previously been a first for Unity on PlayStation, if I remember right.
Yeah, they were one of our first games on PlayStation 3.
It's kind of neat to have a project that kind of sits at the front and becomes well known enough. Like I imagine that with it being in that position, you guys are familiar with the things that it does.
Yeah, for sure. Like especially since they were one of the first ones on PlayStation, we had to work with them a lot to iron out like the issues with our support for the platform. And so when it came to moving it to Linux, like we already had a good relationship with them.
Yeah, that's cool. So what kind of response do you feel that that you got from developers when you announced that there was going to be Linux support available?
I think people were pretty positive. For developers, like at the time, for a humble indie bundle, like you had to have a Linux port to get in. And so it was a big thing for Unity developers for that market to finally be open to them.
Do you feel like you have much of an idea of the kind of reception that the engine has had from Linux users?
Well, I mean, I do have access to the internet. I think the reception has been overall positive. Like there's been some negative stuff when people encounter bugs or like kind of ports where the game developer has put less effort into like testing and QA. But overall, like I think people are happy. And if you look at like the games on Steam for Linux, like there's a big proportion of Unity games on there. And so I think it's good.
Yes, there is that thing where you have made it extremely easy to publish your games on Linux for developers who don't use any kind of crazy middleware. Like, it's always quoted as the push of a single button, pretty much. Is that right? To simplify it?
That's the ideal. Of course, there are always things that happen or that you have to check for, like differences in file systems or pad mappings or stuff like that. But in the ideal case, like you can just take a project and push the button and it will run on Linux.
Yes, it seems like some developers have taken it a bit too literally and they press that button and that's all they ever do. Some of them don't even run it once on Ubuntu 12.04 out of the box or whatever. And then are surprised that they get lots of complaints from Linux users. And that, I guess, this ineptitude of these developers can reflect back on the engine a bit, even though it's undeserved.
Yeah, that's a bit unfortunate. And I guess it's kind of a collision of our marketing and, yeah.
Technological facts.
Yeah, reality, I guess. But like the end goal for sure is to just make it so that it works at least as much as reality allows.
So what are the news on the editor front for Linux? Is there anything happening during your fun time? Can you talk about anything?
There's nothing I can really talk about. I would definitely like to see the editor on Linux, like whether or not it makes sense, like for the company to invest a lot of resources in it, is a decision that we all have to make together, I guess.
If Linux support for the editor did happen, do you feel that it's something that would come out of that fun time space?
Oh, for sure. Because there are a lot of, I think there are a lot of us internally who have an interest in that. And so, I mean, there's a big motivation for us.
It seems like it has become the goal for a lot of other engine developers to have their editors also on Linux and Mac and Windows. Like we are seeing with Unreal Engine 4 or CryEngine is on the way, and some other smaller engines like Leadworks have done it. So it seems like to be a trend in the rest of the industry, which might hopefully make it a bit more of a good proposition to your own bosses to put the editor on Linux.
Yeah, hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
Exactly.
So, what do you feel have been the biggest hurdles that you've had for Linux support for the engine up to this point?
The biggest issues that we see are probably related to the variance in graphics hardware support, closely followed by the variance in joystick input mapping. Like it seems it's fairly common for devs to just support, for example, the Xbox pad mapping and then not provide any configuration option, and that's a bit unfortunate if you have any other gamepad, essentially.
Is that issue actually Linux specific? Because it seems to me that on the whole front of PC gaming, the Xbox controller has been the only thing that existed for years, and everything else you're out of luck. You get like reversed axis on your joysticks or whatever if you're not using an Xbox 360 controller.
Well, actually, I don't use Windows that much, so I'm not that familiar. Like, I had the impression that most gamepad drivers gave you a way to, like, basically set it up as an Xbox controller.
Yeah, and I've seen that or heard that from Windows users as well, that there are some games that just support the Xbox controller or gamepad and nothing else. It's kind of a sad trend that people seem to feel that it's okay to not provide configuration options.
Yeah, it should be. Even for if you don't like the default mapping, right, you should be able to remap like the shoot and jump and everything,
right,
instead of just assuming. But hopefully some of this will be addressed like with the new support.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool. Are there any other features coming up in Unity 5 that you think might be of interest to Linux users?
I'm trying to think. Like, there's a lot of fixes, but we've also been rolling a lot of fixes into the Unity 4 releases with the new like patch release mechanism system that we've been doing, where we basically just roll out like a bug fix release every single week. So the gamepad stuff is the big feature for Unity 5. There's also generally like some OpenGL support improvements coming for Unity, which they're not Linux specific, but they will apply to Linux, and so they'll give us better, like make us more of a first class citizen with respect to like DirectX 11 style features.
And with regards to the updates that have been coming down for Unity 4, I got to say a big thank you on behalf of the community for putting some time and effort into helping track down some of those mouse issues that have been plaguing a number of people.
Yeah, of course. That one was super frustrating, actually, because like it was happening for everyone but me, essentially. And so I had a really hard time nailing it down, and it actually turned out to be two separate issues that we had to take out together. So
right.
Do
you have a bit of a post-mortem on that? One was poll rate related, and the other one?
Yeah, so one was if the poll rate was significantly different than like the frame rate that you were getting, it would essentially, you would get like exponential acceleration or geometric acceleration like on your mouse movement. And the other one was if you were in in like a full screen resolution that wasn't your native resolution, we were like off by 1 on the center of the screen in some cases, and so then like the mouse movement would like the mouse delta would sometimes come out negative when it shouldn't have been, and so that caused like the jumping.
Yeah, I can see that sort of stuff would be quite a nightmare to identify when it manifests itself as things like, you know, the application appearing to freeze and stuff.
Oh, for sure. And especially dealing with X is always interesting because everything's asynchronous, and so it can become difficult to...
As soon as you start to debug.
Yeah, it can become very difficult to debug, like what's cause and effect.
But that's great to see that come through in, what was it, 4.5.2, I think, was when things started to settle down on that front seriously.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm super happy as well.
It's just a matter now of getting game developers to try and move up and adopt stuff. Is there anything that you feel that can be done? You know, do you have any suggestions or recommendations for people who want to encourage developers to move up to that version or future versions of Unity?
I would say just ask them. Like, tell them that you know that there's a bug fix for something that you want in whichever release, and ask them, hey, can you guys upgrade? Like, that would really help me enjoy your game more.
It's a tricky one. I've encountered some developers who feel like it's you know, they've got a released game and they don't want to potentially introduce new, you know, problems that might arise with a patch release, and you know, they want to leave their game stable. But yeah, it can be a quite a tough thing to work through. But it's good to see that at least most of the games that I care about have been looking towards moving up.
Yeah, it's totally understandable that they don't want to fix what's not broken, right? But I think the important thing is to make them understand that it is broken.
Yeah.
I guess this is that issue meeting with the one issue where they don't really test their Linux versions.
Right.
And when those two meet, they are not aware of how it is actually for the people playing it on that platform.
Yeah, that's not helpful either. Or if they do test, I mean, it's possible for some of the things that their configuration just doesn't trigger the issue. And so it doesn't seem like a big deal to them, or as big a deal to them.
Yeah, we encountered a couple of little bits and pieces like that with the fall, where you know, John would send me something to test, and I go, oh hey, you know, it's doing this, and be like, what, really? And we'd have to work through it. But yeah, like if somebody doesn't have a person on board who can be familiar enough to try a few things and notice, you know, even if it's not the, you know, ultimate badness of some bug manifesting itself, like even just to notice the hints of something happening, you know, that could be really helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Tak, since I imagine you guys try and keep an eye to things that use the engine, do you have any sort of favorite Unity using games that you'd recommend to Linux gamers?
Oh man, there's a lot of good games.
To put you on the spot.
Yeah, of course. No, I'm really looking forward to the Dragonfall Director's Cut. I really enjoyed like the original Shadowrun Returns campaign, and I had just started to play Dragonfall when they announced the Director's Cut, and simultaneously announced that the save games would not be compatible. So I kind of just dropped it there and waited for the Director's Cut. And also Wasteland 2, I'm looking forward to as well. But other than that, like the ones I mentioned that I've been playing, Night Squad, Assault Android Cactus, Gang Beasts, these are great games. Like I tend to play a lot of local multiplayer games just because we have this setup that's nice to all play games together. But yeah, so that's a few anyway.
That's cool.
Yeah, I got lucky, quote unquote, on Dragonfall because I didn't really play the DLC as well. And which I would like to point out is awesome. They gave everybody that had the DLC, everybody got the director's cut for free, so they are not double dipping at all. If you already have it, you get that version as well.
Yeah, I thought that was super nice.
But yeah, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the community, Tak? Or Levi, sorry?
Oh, there's so many things. I don't have anything in particular. I'm just here to hang out and chat, so...
Yeah, cool.
If you have anything...
Yeah, that's a special thing I want to point out. Like many people here already know, Levi, aka Tech, he doesn't go into the guest closet after this. He's actually a member of our community, has been for quite some time. And how did that happen? How did you find SteamLUG?
Actually, I don't remember how I first came across it, but it's the kind of community like that I would be a member of even if I weren't working on Linux support at Unity. Like I've always just been a Linux like user and developer and gamer in so much as that was possible before a few years ago. So it's kind of a natural fit for me.
Yeah, cool. It has been great to have you around.
Well, it's been great being around.
I hope people haven't pestered you too much with their Unity bug reports, me included.
Actually, no, that stuff is always welcome. One of the issues we have actually is that there are not, like a lot of bug reports don't make it from the user through the developer to us. And so it's totally possible that you're telling me stuff that I don't know about, or you're giving me a way to reproduce something that I haven't seen before. Or you're telling me about something that the developer won't get around to telling me for a month. So all that kind of stuff is certainly welcome.
There's also the possibility of a developer not quite understanding the bug report that they're getting and not being able to convey exactly what's going on. And if somebody can talk more directly to you guys, then there's an opportunity for you to ask a clarifying question or something, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Like the interactivity is also really nice, like you mentioned. And also it seems like for games, there's not always a clear way that you can report a bug to the developer and they will actually read it. Like sometimes you can complain on the Steam forum, or sometimes the game has its own forum on their website that they monitor, or sometimes like they only respond to Twitter, and so it can be really tough. And so if you just want to like talk to someone in person, it's much easier.
Still reporting stuff is always worthwhile, but also taking advantage of other communication channels and trying to help facilitate the spread of that information upstream. That's really positive, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Is there anything you wanted to ask us, Levi?
I don't know. Is there anything in particular other than editor support that you'd like to see out of Unity on Linux?
I would like you to force it as much as possible onto your customers, onto your developers, to not be able to publish a game on Linux without having their LC sanitized. So I don't always get floating point errors with my Unity games because people forgot to figure out that there are different locales that use comma separation for their floats.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, it basically has to do with how floats are serialized in .NET. But the thing I don't understand is who is serializing floats and like reloading them as part of their game data. Like I just don't get it.
Everybody? I don't know. It happens in most games. It literally does.
Yeah, it's kind of mad.
Yeah, apparently. I just don't understand it.
And it is also not Unity specific. A lot of ports, we can talk about Flibit when he has another FNA port going, he sometimes forgets it. He has it in the back of his head, but if somebody in that locale area tests it, that can come up. And other ports of other games on other engines as well. So this is a common issue, people forgetting that.
Oh, I can imagine like anything that's using, well, for sure, like XNA monogame will have exactly the same problem for exactly the same reason, which is basically that like when you print a float in C# with no other stuff, like it gets printed in the local locale, and when you read one, it gets read in the local locale. So yeah.
Yeah, it's odd. I'm just trying to think, like, there isn't a Linux web player yet, is there?
Actually, we had a prototype for the web plugin, but like when we did native client, we were like, oh, native client's going to be the future, so we'll just focus on that. And now we're doing WebGL, which actually works flawlessly on Linux. And so we're kind of aiming toward that, especially since, for example, Chrome is basically turning off plugin support very soon.
Yeah, right. So will we see that in Unity 5, do you think?
Yeah, there's like the first version of WebGL support will be in Unity 5.0, and we'll continue to improve it throughout the cycle.
Yeah, cool.
And that is completely plugin free?
Yes.
That is nice.
Yeah, it's really, really nice.
That's great news for people who want to play games in their browser.
Yeah, like if you check out the blog post where we announced it, and I'll find the link later. But there are a couple of games. There's like our Angry Bots demo, and then there's what is this zombie game from Matt Finger? Dead Trigger 2 that have been ported to WebL and running in the browser without a plugin, and they perform pretty well. Like I'm pleasantly surprised.
Wanting to play games in a browser is hugely foreign to me, but if that becomes available, if that puts Linux users on parity with people on other platforms, I think that's great.
Well, it's particularly kind of great for like the casual sort of games that, like maybe a puzzle game or something, where you can just sit down and click into the thing and like go through a couple puzzles, and then you get called away, and that's fine.
We are basically talking Facebook games here. It seems like there was, for a short time, there was a trend where people were trying to put actually more complex games into the browser, like Interstellar Marines early in its development. That was pretty much browser-based only, if I remember correctly. And Heroes and Generals, I don't think that's Unity-based, the actual action game part of that. But it seems like that has kind of ceased, and they are back to native, and what's left in the browser is Facebook games and puzzles and mini-games generally.
I know a lot of smaller developers who like to push stuff out to the web client so that they can, they can update it on their server without having to push stuff out to, heaps of people with standalone builds.
Yeah, it's great for testing and prototyping to just be able to put something up and send it to people.
But I think stuff like 7-day FPS and game jams and stuff, like almost all the games that use Unity that come out of that end up being web-based.
Yeah, it could be. Actually, we see quite a few games like out of the 7-day FPS and that kind of thing, like Ludum Dares, that end up getting polished and made into like finished shipping games. Like Receiver, I think, was kind of in that category.
Right. Well, we might wrap up the chat there. Thanks heaps for doing that with us, Levi. You're very welcome to hang around and join us for the rest of the show. Comment on bits and pieces as we go, if you like.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. So quickly, SteamLUG community stuff. As far as past events go, we had some Monaco, some Sanctum 2, some Team Fortress 2, and some Forced. Derrida, did you manage to make it to any of those?
No, I don't play TF2, Sanctum 2 is too buggy for me to play, and I don't have Forced, and I don't like Monaco that much. I'm sorry, I'm a bit negative on that front, but I wasn't there for any of them.
Well, out of those, I was free enough to make it to the Sanctum 2 one, and I think we played for something mad, like 7 hours. But it's fun. I had a good time. We found some secrets and stuff, which everybody was very excited about discovering. And then I can't remember who it was. It might have been... No, I have no idea who it was. Someone had the sort of, they call it a viral achievement, where the developers get it, and you can only get the achievement by playing with someone who's already got it. And that was very exciting for people when when they managed to get this coveted achievement thing.
Didn't Left 4 Dead 2 have the same thing?
I don't know. I know Brutal Legend has one that's called like 7 Degrees of Tim Schafer. But yeah, probably. So moving on, as far as upcoming events go, after the cast, we're going to go up for some Frozen Synapse, which should be cool. Tomorrow, we're doing No More Room in Hell. You be around for that one, Derrida?
Probably. Note to everybody who has played No More Room in Hell previously and thinks about not coming because he knows everything already, that game had a bit of a content update and there are new maps, so if you have played since then, be there, so we can run around like chickens being chased by zombies again. In new maps we don't know yet. On the 26th, we have Planetary Annihilation. I guess this is in your alley, Cheese?
Yeah, this is our first event since the game has been released. It should be pretty cool. Looking forward to playing through it. Might try and see if we can get some developer presence. I don't know if we'll have much luck, but we'll certainly try there. And then we'll close out the month with our first Orbital Gear event. Now, I think we're in the process of getting a dedicated server set up for that, which should be pretty cool. Have you had a chance to look at that?
No, I am not even aware of what it is, off the top of my head.
It's sort of like this. It's like a deathmatch game. It's got another game mode, which is some kind of base defense attack thing, but I haven't really looked at that much. The core of the game is this deathmatch thing where the environment is made up of a collection of planets, and they all have gravity, and you can jump between them and stuff, and you can run around on the surface. And it plays out kind of like Soldat, that side-on 2D crazy platformer. A few of us in the community have been playing it, and it's kind of cool. Got some rough edges, but it's fun.
Let's move on to community stuff. I think you have been doing something about a bit of an old game that got a release on Linux.
Yeah. So I am a huge fan of Another World, and about a year ago, Ryan Gordon was looking. He put out a tweet. He just sort of said, "Does anybody know how to reach Eric Shahi? Because I want to beg to do a Linux port of Another World." And since I had previously corresponded with him, I was like, "Yeah, totally, I can make this happen." And it turns out that the address that I had emailed Eric from years and years and years ago was full, and couldn't find any way to convince or to get in touch with anybody who could get it emptied so that we could make contact. And so we spent about Ryan and myself both. We sort of spent about a year chasing dead ends before we finally managed to find someone who could put the right people in touch. And yeah, we managed to get a native version released just last week. I had the opportunity to be testing it for a couple of months before release, and it's pretty solid. But that also gave me a chance to write down some of the thoughts that have been brewing for the past 23 years. And I've compiled all those together in a nice, long 5,000-word article on why I think Another World is kind of neat. So if anybody is excited by reading my reading or reading about Another World, then totally check it out.
Your work on that gives more content than the actual game, I think.
No way, the game is way deep. But no, I totally... I think in the past 2 months, I think I've finished the game 40 times. Anytime I'd fired up the game to double check something or make sure that something was, that I was talking about something correctly, I find that I wouldn't be able to stop, always play through to the end.
Yeah, I guess everybody has a game like that, unless you have no heart. And then...
I find it really, really interesting. It was certainly a product of its time, but at the same time it was incredibly groundbreaking with the things that it did, and it's still one of the most well-constructed and well-paced stories that I've seen in a game. And the 20th anniversary edition comes with all this sort of bonus content, which is pretty cool as well. Yeah, I'm super excited about it. Have either of you guys played it before?
I played the original a bit. I think in the US it was called Out of This World or something.
It was, yeah. It had like a name collision with the TV show that was on at the time.
Oh, right. But yeah, I didn't really get it at the time, and so I kind of got frustrated and never finished it.
Yeah, I guess I'm in the same ballpark. I tried playing the Super Nintendo version of that, but I guess I just couldn't get into that game. It was a bit on the clunky side of things as far as the controls are concerned. During those days, I was more interested in playing Super Mario, and I guess I just didn't get it.
Yeah, it's certainly not. I mean, it looks like a platformer, but it's really not the same kind of thing. I think the increased frame rate that you can get on the with the anniversary edition running natively on Linux compared to, say, the original version running on the Amiga, it definitely makes the game feel a bit more responsive. But if anybody is totally excited about the game but doesn't want to wade through my 5,000-word article, I have done some fan art for the game, and since piece of picture's worth 1,000 words, right? You can totally get your 5,000 words worth within a couple of seconds.
There might just be 5,000 people in the audience in that fan art.
You'll read one word each. Oh yeah, Norbert's raised one of the pieces that I did, which is in the background of there's this crazy mayhem arena scene where you're sort of in this big coliseum and there are gladiators fighting in the background and stuff. And just as you enter, one of them defeats their opponent and then raises their sword in the air, kind of like He-Man. And they hold it there for the entire scene, like the entire time that you're there were these explosions everywhere and rockets flying around and laser blasts everywhere and stuff. This guy's just holding his sword up. He's got that sense of victory and no one's ever going to take it away from him. And it always made me laugh whenever I played. So I did a nice piece of fan art of it. SteamLUG Cast, where Cheese waffles on about his fan art.
Yeah, I love how you say all these things, and probably the actual facts about this are they animated that thing and they didn't figure anyone would stick around long enough to notice that they didn't bother to give him any kind of move-out sequence.
I don't know.
And you attach the story to it. It's lovely. It's like
I'm totally reading something into it, but
Rose Cheek, Little Cheese's game of his childhood he loves above everything else. If anyone insults that game, I guess you would treat him like he kicked your dog.
no, I don't know. I mean, it's not for everybody. It's totally not everybody's cup of tea. Yeah, I don't need for everyone to like it. I get more than enough enjoyment out of it on my own. And like part of that sort of stuff. Like when you do fan art, it's about exploring your own perception of things, But anyway, Another World, so good. I like it's funny. People talk to me now about games that are coming, and I'm like, no, I don't care. I get everything I need.
It's a bit unusual to be in that situation as a Linux gamer. Like, I can't play all the stuff I have.
It totally is. It feels really surreal.
My backlog is now full of stuff that I didn't just get through the Humble Bundle, and I have no intention to play anyway because it was just like value added I might ever play. I now have so many games I have to play through, which I want to play through. It's crazy. Times have changed for sure.
It's interesting to see what kind of impact that's going to have on people when they're no longer scrounging to support every single developer that supports Linux, or where they're not picking up every single game they can get because that's all there is. When people start being a bit more choosy, and I feel like we're seeing that already. I wonder whether or not that's going to shape the way that the market is currently perceived. All because Another World is here now.
Well, we will find out. Indie devs are going to be vocal about themselves, as we have seen. So we will find out one way or another. Either we are still a diverse enough bunch to support everything that is worth supporting out there, or not, and that might just mean some devs are moving out again. But we will see.
Yeah. It's funny talking about Another World again. It's interesting to see the difference toward in mentality regarding cross-platform support between today and 20 years ago, when there were 6 or 7 dominant gaming platforms, or actually probably more.
Yeah, Another World on Super Nintendo, Amiga, DOS, and what have you.
I think it's on 26 platforms now.
Most cross-platform game ever.
Yeah. And part of that is the game was written to run in its own kind of runtime, so that all of the game stuff could be platform independent. So it's like this totally a strategy that was intended from the get-go. Whereas you don't get that so much these days.
So that probably means it runs completely software rendered things everywhere?
No, it's still got a hardware renderer.
I mean, back in the day.
Oh, right. Yeah, probably. I have to admit to being a little bit ignorant about that.
So, Tech, you wanted to add?
I was just going to mention also that the approach that they took is super non-typical for the time, like writing the VM and then hosting the game on top of that.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. And it's, in my article I got a couple of quotes from Ryan where he said that, the port, he didn't have to touch any of that stuff. All he had to do was make a few changes to get get I/O and the renderer behaving nicely.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that though, because he mentioned something called portable C++, and I'm not. Sounds like some kind of mythical creature.
Oh, right, because the runtime was originally written in assembler, but it's been ported to C++ prior to all of this. Because if you're writing in an assembler for an Amiga, then that's not that usable.
That won't run anywhere else.
Yeah. So the runtime had been rewritten in C++, which is more portable than the original machine code version of the runtime. And I mean, I don't know what other platforms did at the time, whether there's a legacy of that, I don't know. But yeah, the code review by Fabian Sanglard that I was going to mention, that probably goes into a bit more detail than I can I'm just a dude who loves the game, you know. I'm not one of the awesome people who've reverse engineered it and studied the hell out of it. And there are a whole bunch of interesting people who've done interesting things like that, which I'll be writing a follow-up article on very soon. So if you're interested in Another World, stay tuned. I totally want to hear perspectives from players as well. So if anybody is really excited about the game and believes that it's still interesting and relevant today, send me an email at cheese@twolovebees.com, and I will totally take what you have to say and try and work it into what I'm doing. Exciting. That project's can be exciting, but we can totally cut me talking about it out if we need.
We'll see about that.
Moving on. The Double Fine Game Club is doing stacking starting this weekend with a live interview with project lead Lee Petty tomorrow, if anybody's interested. We'll be playing through that for about 3 weeks. People can join in the chat with developers, share the memories of the game, critique, and so forth. It's always good fun.
Should be awesome for the guy who's actually going to play it on the stream. He can take his hands off the controller every 5 seconds because the game steals the controls to show him some useless scenery again.
If you don't like that sort of thing, the game is supremely annoying. But it's got a lot of charm to it, though. I think it's kind of neat. As long as you avoid going after the unique dolls, then you can avoid all of those little tiny 5-second cutscenes. And they're not skippable as well. That's one thing I really hate, is non-skippable automated sequences. And Simon has written up a list of guidelines for players or Linux users who want to give feedback to developers. If anybody's thinking of giving some feedback to a dev, totally check it out. If you got any thoughts on what makes good feedback, share it there as well. Be good.
First, you run up to the dev and tell him everything sucks and they are awful and should die. Not, because you should read that post and figure out how to really engage a developer about issues and feedback you have.
It's kind of nice. I mean, for some of us who've been reporting problems and dealing with testing for a long time, it does kind of feel like obvious stuff, but it's great to have a resource that you can point somebody towards to say, hey, if you want to give a bit more depth to your bug report, just have a quick read through this, and it saves repeating all the time. I think it's kind of handy.
Yeah, there's nothing worse as a dev than stumbling across some forum thread from 6 months ago that's 400 posts about some bug that you never heard about.
And nobody's bothered to include things like system specs.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, if we can put an end to that, that'd be awesome. Moving on to Valve news, the SteamOS talk at DebConf 14 is now up for anybody who'd like to view the archive.
It's quite good.
Have either of you had a chance to watch that?
Yeah, not really much new in there, but some reiterations of important points, I would like to point out. They said during that conference what SteamOS isn't, and one thing was a desktop Linux operating system, because I still see that ghost going through all the forums. Please don't do that to yourself.
I don't think that'll ever leave, to be honest.
But it is so insanely stupid. You could just pick anything but that one.
I don't know. They said that it's a terrible desktop OS, and from a pre-configured perspective, yeah, it totally is. But the people who want to do that are going to add other repos, and they're going to set stuff up, and at the end of the day, it's not really going to be that different from running normal Debian.
Sadly, that is only half true. There are those people that totally can do it, and they don't need a warning. They already know they want to do it for whatever reason. But there are also those people that have thought this would be their new definitive Linux operating system, and they aren't necessarily that smart. It's still that we should put an end to this perception that this is meant to be that. It is not meant to be that. You can do it because it's Linux. You can do it if you want to do it. That's what it's all about. But it's not marketed as that. It's not designed, developed to be that. And they frankly don't care about that.
It was interesting to see that in response to people within the audience asking whether there would be support for other, Linux distros, that the mantra that people were responding with was, you can already do that. but I don't think it really addressed the whole support thing, where Steam is, or Valve are only supporting Ubuntu and SteamOS, and not choosing to, officially provide support for other distros.
Don't expect that to change.
It's kind of sad to see that not addressed directly.
Yeah, it is addressed in the most efficient and direct way possible through the Steam runtime. That is your support on other platforms.
Right. But couldn't you equally say that we'll support any Linux distro that the Steam runtime can run on?
Not really, but because then you really have to do it. It's a non-commitment way of actually supporting people. It's a support by virtue of functioning instead of support by, here is your legal guaranteed support that this will work when you put it on there.
Yeah, I don't know if that's really a positive thing.
It isn't, but it is what we just have to come to expect. Because it's true, too, that it's meaningless and senseless to support all of the Linux ecosystem.
Well, it's a tough sell, like in a commercial environment. Like anytime you bring up Linux support, somebody comes up with one of those graphics that has like 8 jillion nodes that represent all of the different Linux distributions. And it's just really hard to sell people on the idea that it's not actually that hard to support Linux in general.
Yeah, it does. I don't know. From my perspective, it feels like a perception issue. I've always championed the notion that there isn't really that big a difference between most Linux distros, and that most of it comes down to packaging and community. Do you feel that, because Unity's in the same boat, right? Unity only supports Ubuntu officially at the moment?
Yeah, that's correct. And it's kind of a similar, I mean, that's kind of the motivation, right? Like, I've literally been in discussions where people are bringing up this graphic and saying, like, okay, like, what chunk of this do you want to, like, commit to?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's also counter to how the ecosystem sort of works in proprietary land, where, usually there's a company that you can go to and say, hey, we need a hand, or your stuff doesn't work, or you can at least blame another company. But you don't quite have that in the Linux distro ecosystem.
No, not as much. And for the same reason, it's difficult to measure user share.
Totally.
Because all Linux installs are not driven by a purchase through some company.
I think the Steam hardware survey does a reasonably good job at that, even though I still don't get how they prompt. It seems to be accurate in what it does.
I don't know. I don't feel like there's enough transparency of process to put any faith in those numbers.
I kind of agree, especially, like, I'm not sure if this is true, but like the rumor is that they don't give it for Steam beta users, which I have to imagine that a big proportion of Linux users are running the Steam beta client.
That might explain a lot. I need to check this.
It's funny because we constantly hear people saying that they don't get the survey, and we're well aware that a large portion of the community does run the beta. We've got Apo in chat saying he gets it.
Yeah, the last time I got it was last month, after I've played mostly on Linux, booted into Windows to get one round of Red Orchestra 2 going, and instantly got the prompt after I was done with that. It's like they are flipping the bird at me saying, oh, we noticed you booted into Windows like once per month. Let's give you the survey exactly then.
Yeah, it's funny, I had a similar sort of occurrence where I fired up Steam on my Mac laptop while I was away from my desk, and suddenly Steam survey prompt, and I was like, well, I don't think I can do it.
And to answer Norbert's question, I always deny the survey prompt under Windows. I don't know if that diminishes my chances of being picked later on, but if they want to troll me like that, I troll them right back.
Well, I'd like to hope that they've fixed that bug.
So yeah.
So, Valve have opened up a forum thread in the Steam Universe group to try and track issues that people are having with the AMD graphics drivers. If anybody is using AMD hardware and has something they can contribute to the discussion, totally check it out.
Well, picking up the slack for AMD, I'm not surprised, but I guess it's necessary.
Yeah, look, if something positive comes of it, then that's, if that results in some upstream bug reports or pressure to to get things sorted, then great.
Well, to be fair, didn't they say that they worked a lot with Intel and NVIDIA, like when they were preparing the launch for Steam for Linux?
And they did, yeah.
I guess they also worked or tried to work with AMD. I can't see them dismissing them out of hand, but it was probably harder.
Yeah, I don't know. They weren't vocal about working with AMD, but they did talk quite a bit about the positive experiences they'd had working with NVIDIA and Intel. In particular, talking about the value of having source access to drivers and stuff, and being able to profile their engine running in inside the driver and all that. So who knows? Maybe this will lead to AMD officially adopting the open source driver, and that would be better for everyone.
Moving on to tech news, to a company that's actually up to snuff with their drivers. NVIDIA has released driver version 343.22 with support for their latest GTX 970 and 980 cards.
Sweet. Is there any features that might interest users of older cards?
Mostly reads like bug fixes, it seems.
Cool.
Which is important because I don't know if that's in there, I haven't installed the driver yet, but NVIDIA still has that issue where some applications flicker. I don't know if people know that here, but using Firefox at the moment with the latest NVIDIA drivers can be a bit problematic.
Is that what window manager are you using?
Compass.
There was some workaround that I had to turn on in CCSM for this problem, where it's like the window gets damaged and it's not flushing.
I don't know. It's more like in some applications they just flicker constantly, or when the window gets refreshed. I don't know.
Yeah, I had a similar thing. I can't remember what it was now, but one of the OpenGL workarounds in the Compass config settings manager fixed it for me.
Yeah, but that seems to be a bug with NVIDIA. This might also be related to, like, Letworks, for example, has a bug on NVIDIA only in the model viewer, where it seems like, depending on the depth or the distance of the camera to the model, its geometry just disappear, and it doesn't have that in the actual engine or in the editor, but only in that model viewer. It's kind of silly, I don't know. So it's not like NVIDIA is without issues, but they are more on top of things than AMD, that's for sure.
So, moving on to more general gaming news. Something I forgot to mention when we were lingering on Another World is that there's another very, very short article that I wrote, which has even more quotes from Ryan Gordon on the Linux port, which people might be interested in. And the next topic that we have on the list here to discuss is the announcement that Space-Based DF9 will be releasing next month.
In a state which many people think is not up to what was promised in the beginning. And the internet is basically on fire about it at the moment. If you go into the Space-Based DF9 Steam forums, it's full of hate and sulfur and toxic puddles of waste on the ground.
I think this highlights a very important issue, or a very important thing that developers seem to overlook, which is expectation management. Looking back over stuff, I don't see promises of stuff. I see promise in the project, but I don't see explicit promises of features. The roadmap that they put up very early on very clearly said, right at the top, that this was a rough outline of their direction, and that there was no guarantee that any of it was going to go in the game. But compared to the tone of the Alpha 6 video, and when we had JP on the show here with us a couple episodes back, it does feel like the release announcement is quite abrupt. And I think that a lot of the disappointment that is manifesting itself as the grumpies is a result of, between Alpha 5 and 6 there was quite a long delay and there wasn't a lot of communication there. And then when Alpha 6 came out, it was accompanied with a statement that sort of said, we understand that we're a little bit too quiet, things are going to change, there's going to be more frequent updates, and we're going to be talking more with the community. And then we get this release announcement, which feels like it sort of comes a bit out of the blue. I don't know. I feel like the game's fun in its current state.
I really can't comment because I haven't bought the game or played it in any form. And to be honest, seeing that, I'm a bit happy I didn't do it, because I think I would be among the disappointed. I wouldn't be among the people who want to throw Tim Schafer off a cliff at the moment, but I guess I wouldn't be happy with it releasing like that.
Yeah, well, it's fair enough, if, different people have different ideas of where things are going to go. I didn't have any huge expectations. It's just a fun little project that I was happy to be involved with and happy to support, and I feel like I'm getting what I need out of it. So for me, at least, there's the biggest disappointment is that nice people like JP won't be working on the project very much. But yeah. Something to note as well with the release is that there's going to be some source made available to people so that they can continue expanding the game and the community can pick up progressing it forward if they're interested. And if people are keen to pick up on that, I can see some of that initial promise being realized. I can see it evolving into something really interesting, but it's certainly going to require Double Fine navigating the current community management nightmare that they're in right now.
We will see how that turns out.
We sure will.
Some people have announced they have cancelled their Custom Quest 2 pre-orders and stuff like that. So it's really, truly more a general thing with being unhappy with Double Fine, for some people at least.
Yeah. Like again, expectation management seems to be the biggest challenge there that I can see. People who got on board with Broken Age but didn't quite catch that the plan was for things to change and grow and become something much, much larger. So that's been a challenge to work around, is people who feel that shouldn't have happened or weren't expecting that to happen. So I think that, like I said, there's a lot of build-up of resentment from a couple of different angles that is leading to this. So yeah, I definitely reaching beyond Space Base itself. But yeah, the other thing to note is that this sort of stuff happens all the time. Like feature sets change during development. Development timeframes often get truncated, but nobody hears about it. I would feel that if you didn't know anything about the game and came at it as it is at the moment, you probably think it was interesting. If you came at it as it will be at release with the extra bits and pieces that they're going to be adding between now and then, you probably think it was an okay small game.
I think that's a function of the early access process, that people are getting involved with these games earlier than they used to traditionally, and so they're seeing this kind of stuff when in the old days it would have just been like a game got released and it didn't really match the PR that had come out years before.
Right. And we do see a lot of that, but people get over it fairly quickly, and I think part of that's because they're not as invested, as personally invested as they are in something that they've, felt like they've helped bring to reality.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope that people are still able to find something they enjoy, regardless of how things turn out.
So let's move on to some more cheerful news. That is, Tropico 5 is now out for Linux. It just released a couple of hours ago, and I don't know, has anyone here tried it already?
I haven't.
I have not.
But I've seen several people on my friends list, fire it up and get into it.
Seems like some people might have issues starting it, but mostly I've heard good stuff, that it is working fine. So yeah, it seems like your average first port to Linux by that developer. I'm a bit disappointed by the stealth launch. This time we didn't get a nice big banner. No for Linux and SteamOS and Mac. Mac is now out for the first time as well.
I don't know. It's tricky to know exactly what's going on there. Looking at their Facebook page, they're all like Linux and Mac coming out at this date. So they've put some kind of prior effort into things. It's possible that they've pushed the game live and they'll be doing an announcement, later in the day once they're sure that everything hasn't exploded. I don't know.
Yeah, it might be the developer, if that one sits in Europe and has pushed out his stuff around his working hours, and the marketing people sit in the US, and it's just about...
It could be.
Yeah, it's just early afternoon there. We might still see stuff today, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
If they choose to not make a lot of noise about that, that's a bit sad, but I guess we have to live with it and buy it, even though they don't want us to buy it with their advertisement.
The Humble Indie Bundle 12 is out, which features all Linux games and a magazine and t-shirts.
Yes, SteamWorld Dig, Hammerwatch, Gunpoint, Prison Architect, Papers, Please, Luftrousers, Gone Home, The Bridge, Monaco, Race the Sun. All in there. Lots of really good games. So, yeah, but the only sad thing about that bundle is, which I kind of saw coming, they added double beat this price tag to the main bundle for the first time here. I'm not counting the physical goods because that's something completely different and special. That's okay, in my opinion. But you only get Prison Architect if you pay more or equal to $10.
Which is still much less than I think people probably should pay for these games. It does undermine the pay what you want thing.
Yeah, but still, it's price. I don't want to seem entitled, but it is price gauging on their previous strategy. Only one price to beat. So they really want to always pull up the average price by having that standout game be at the top of that from now on. Don't think we will ever see a main indie bundle not have a second price to beat. That is $10 at least.
Yeah. Also interesting was the number of titles. So there were 7 initially and then 3 added later, as opposed to 5 and 5, which is what we normally have.
Yeah, it seems so. What got added? The last 3, The Bridge, Monaco, and Race the Sun, was it that?
Yeah. Out of these, I think Gunpoint is the only one that hadn't had a release version previously available on Linux. I think Gunpoint was in beta before that.
That is something we should come to expect from now on, that less and less games will be completely new to Linux because more and more games are being released on Linux before Humble Bundles or outside of Humble Bundles. We should accept this as a good status quo. It's good to have these games, be able to pay for these games at full price, outside of bundles, have developers recognize us not just to get into those bundles, which frankly they don't need to anymore because of how many different non-cross-platform bundles there are now.
Yeah. So have you had a chance to play any of the games from this bundle?
Well, I have played Hammerwatch and Papers, Please before, but I haven't had the chance to play any of the new ones. I tried Gone Home, but I guess this is a Unity-based game, and they didn't fix the locale issue, so I was kind of pushing a button. I don't know how they handle movement in there, and I was zapping through the environment and landing through walls. I bet as soon as I delete the config and add my own fixes for the locale, all will be fine, but it seems to be one of those where they didn't pay proper attention to that.
I think Gunpoint's the one that I'm most excited about out of this current bundle.
Even though I've already played it a lot, I would still say Papers, Please is the best game in that bundle. The most important, the most interesting one.
Yeah, I that's probably very likely. I haven't played all of them, but yeah, Papers, Please does look like it's the standout title.
And Hammerwatch is also always fun if you like Gauntlet.
Yeah, and that just got a free expansion recently, I think.
Yeah, that's true, so lots of value in that bundle if you don't already own most of those.
Now, the weekly sale has only a couple of Linux games in it. The current Merge Games weekly bundle. It has Deadly 30, Battle Group 2, and Bridge Constructor Medieval, which is this sort of, I don't know, gamified version of the original Bridge Constructor, where you gotta like build roofs on your bridges to stop catapults from smashing horses and carriages as they go across the stuff, and then like sometimes enemies are approaching and you gotta destroy your bridge to stop them from getting to the other side. It's weird, but it looks cool.
Yeah, Deadly 30 has been out on Linux for quite a while. I remember seeing it first on Tesura before Steam for Linux was even out. And the only thing that kept me from buying that game was that it didn't have a co-op multiplayer, because that's a horde mode 2D side-scroller game, and it was crying from the rooftops to have a multiplayer, which it didn't get. So,
moving on. Hack and Slash was released, was it last week? I think it was last week.
I don't know, I haven't been following it.
So yeah, that was released, and they've added Steam Workshop support and sources for all of the general game behavior scripts, but not for the game content scripts. So people can check that out and mod it up and do whatever they like.
Yes, but what about the game?
As I mentioned earlier, I've been playing it. It's cool. It's like on the surface, it looks like this kind of Zelda-inspired RPG, but you break out of it really quickly and you start modifying the behavior of the elements within the world. So like, you might have an enemy attacking you, and you can modify it so that instead of removing damage from you, it gives you health back, and suddenly you've got this kind of health bank following you around. And once you get to that, it stops being, a normal kind of game, I guess, and starts becoming a puzzle game where it's all about manipulating the environment to progress or to solve puzzles. And then as you get right to the end, it really breaks open, and you're manipulating variables in for loops, or you're changing conditionals in if statements and stuff to make the game do what you want it to do. And some of the analogies and metaphors between programming and the in-game world are a little bit, I don't know, they seem awkward to me, but I know a lot of people who are kind of having a lot of fun with it, so that's really cool. And if the Amnesia Fortnite prototype is anything to go by, it's going to be packed full of additional puzzles and things, stuff embedded in the asset files, like in some of the textures and things. There was it kind of on the same sort of line as Valve's ARGs, with the way that they hide clues and encode things in resources and put little clues here and there. So for people who are into that sort of stuff, there should be a whole bunch to check out.
And for the most important release of the last 2 weeks...
I think you're forgetting Another World.
No, I'm overlooking it intentionally. Wasteland 2 has been released after 2.5 years of development work, after the Kickstarter by inXile, the big one after Double Fine Adventure. It is now out.
Has it been that long?
It has been that long. I am not even aware of that myself, but I'm following Brian Fargo on Twitter, and he says 2.5 years later, so it seems to be that long.
Wow.
Yeah, what was the Kickstarter stuff? The big breakout?
I don't know.
I don't
March.
even remember. Sometime. Yeah, it's out. It's a massive game that rings in at over 20 gigabytes on your hard drive. So I tried to download it overnight, and it filled my second Steam library, so I had to delete stuff.
That's crazy.
Yes, but it is apparently an expansive game. I have only scratched the surface. I'm not even out of the beginning area. You start off in Arizona, and when you have done your first missions there, you move on to another part of the world, and I'm just 3 hours in, and I can't even begin to see the end of that starting zone yet.
So you played the original Wasteland, right?
I tried to, but I never did. I mean, I didn't play it back in the day, and when you start up the original Wasteland now, even if you have the nicely remastered DOSBox version with all the better assets, it's still a horribly outdated interface by today's standard, and I couldn't get into it.
There you go. The crowdfunding campaign ended in April 2012, apparently.
Yeah, that is about 2.5 years. That's correct. Wow.
Wow, is it September already? Why is it September? Go away.
We are getting old, cheese.
Yes.
But yeah, and if you have previously looked at the game and saw that it was a bit too expensive in early access, it has dropped the price by quite a bit. So
Cool.
It's probably the best RPG you are going to get on Linux at the moment. The reviews keep coming in, and they are definitely in the 80s, high 80s, and even 90s area, so go to your trusted reviewer and read about it if you don't trust me, because I haven't played it enough to even tell you anything much about it yet, but I'm hyped for it. It is quite good. It has the atmosphere I wanted, it has a good combat system, and it has a goat that kicks you if it steals its food, or headbutts you.
Well, if it has a goat.
I mean, goats are selling these days, what can you say?
I know, right?
Yeah, you just sold me right there.
So, Levi, did you guys have any kind of interaction with this project at all?
Like early on, our sales and biz dev teams were working a lot with them, but at the time when they were doing the crowdfunding campaign, basically it was about the same time that we had just decided to go ahead and ship Linux support to the public, and so we like they were working like with our sales teams to try to figure out like what would be the right fit for them, and like we were getting ready to push this, and like for them like Linux support was a big thing, and so it kind of just all came together like that.
I remember some heated discussions in their forums about the engine and suggestions by the community, where some people insisted you can't make a good game without Unreal Engine, which I wanted to slap through the internet. But then, yeah, that was the first time it became public knowledge that there was a Linux version of Unity.
Yeah, I think originally they were saying like even if they had to get the source and do the port themselves, like they were like committed to supporting Linux, but thankfully they didn't have to.
That's really cool.
I guess that was helpful for the budget.
Yeah.
I could imagine that.
I think it was probably helpful for publicity as well, because it was a really big thing from a news perspective for Linux gamers as well, and it gave them the opportunity to get coverage, extra coverage for that, because it, even though it's specifically interesting to Linux users, it's still stuff that got covered a little bit outside of the Linux sphere, so it had an impact beyond that, I think.
Yeah, the cross-promotion there was quite interesting. They also did like a thing with the Unity Asset Store, didn't they?
Yeah, they did this campaign, like this contest to try to get people to submit art, I think.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Which some actual artists were a bit sour about, because it was kind of, you put in the work, but there's no guarantee to get paid, because they will pick the best of whatever is contributed. So most actual professional artists were a bit, they were like grunting at that they didn't want to have anything to do with it. They didn't want to waste their time on stuff they didn't get paid for, guaranteed.
So were they getting people to put stuff up on the asset store and then they would be using it? Because doesn't that still give them the ability to monetize stuff?
Yes, but then you put in the work and you still don't have a guarantee to get paid. If you put it on the asset store, of course, it can be monetized, but who knows if you get paid.
I don't know, that seems a lot better than other competition type things.
Yeah, sure. I can't claim to fully understand the details and what they were iffy about, but that is what I read. I'm not in that line of work.
Well, I don't know. I mean, like, as an artist, whenever there's a competition on and you've got to, potentially be giving rights away, you got to make a decision on whether or not you're comfortable with that. Comfortable with not being able to use your professional stuff. But if you've got the ability to continue to monetize it afterwards, then that's sweet. And presumably they were doing something to highlight things that were submitted. So I imagine there was probably some little bit of visibility you could get regardless. But I imagine that there were probably still people with legitimate concerns. Nobody has to feel comfortable with that sort of stuff.
The only thing you have to feel comfortable with at the moment is playing that game and paying for it, of course. We've got some Starbound news, and not just about some silly nightlies and daily vlogs, but a preliminary changelog for what is going to be the next stable build, the next one you are actually going to be able to play without everything crashing and being slow. And it's quite extensive. Seems like the first workings of the new questing system and actual quests are going to be in there, ship upgrades and new weather and new everything. I can't even begin to really give you a comprehensive overview, because let me see, how many lines does this changelog have? It has 218 lines.
Yeah, I've only skimmed through it, but the thing that stands out to me right now is added staff weapons for sci-fi style magic. Isn't that what you look for? That's what everybody's hanging out for. Added heck knife.
Well, added species, added armor and weapons and ships for that species.
Yeah, there's some cool stuff in here.
There's definitely good stuff in there. And I think we will probably have a new event when this stuff is up and working well. What do you think?
Yeah, I reckon, yeah.
So people can steal my stuff again? But maybe the heaters won't fall off the walls because they changed how this stuff works.
Maybe we'll be able to get some regular Starbound gatherings happening and get people keeping a server populated outside of our normal event schedule. That'd be kind of cool.
I still want to do the menial event where we just get as many people as possible in there and mine down an entire planet to the last pixel. Everything that can be mined, we mine down, so that only the lava core at the bottom remains.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yes.
For someone other than me.
I just want to indulge in insanity. Don't claim it is going to be fun or productive. It is just going to be mad.
So the Chasm developers have shared a screenshot of the game running under Linux and saying that it's going to be on Linux on Steam Early Access at the same day as... actually, it might not be Steam Early Access. Reading down, it looks like Early Access via Humble. So there you go. I don't know.
Is there Fest running in the background, or do they share tech with whatever Fest used, and that's why they get the icon? Can you see that on the screenshot? That's the Fest.
I guess, I don't know. I haven't seen that before. I haven't really played much Fez, but yeah, I think it might be XNA, so or Mono or FNA or whatever. Oh, actually, Flibbit's still on the port. I think maybe.
That could explain a bit.
Hmm.
But why aren't we seeing a Fedora screenshot then? Or is that from the actual?
I think that's from the developer. Yeah. Actually, you know, I got no idea if I'm talking out my backside there.
It says in the comments they're using FNA.
Oh right. Well, that explains that then.
And they are looking at a same-day release, which is nice.
Yeah. So Flibbit's not involved with that. They're just using FNA. Just to clarify there.
They are using his gift to the world, which it truly is. It makes Mono not awful on Linux and even Windows and Mac. As we've talked about before, Shadowrun Dragonfall Director's Cut has been released, and it's free to everybody who already owned the Dragonfall DLC for Shadowrun Returns. It is pretty much the same campaign it was before, with some content added and standalone. So, if you're interested in picking that up but had no interest in the older base game, this is your chance. They've even discontinued the sale of the old DLC, so this is the official way to get both these games now. If you want the first one, you buy the first one. If you want Dragonfall, you buy Dragonfall.
And you were saying that anybody who had bought the DLC previously gets a free copy of the Director's Cut?
Yes.
That's cool.
It definitely is. Some people were saying in the forums, at first when they heard about it, they were mad, and then they instantly read that it's going to be free for everybody who owns the DLC, and they were happy again. Because this is not the norm. Some people would gladly double dip on these people for the Director's Cut just a couple of months later. But they do the right thing here, and they should be applauded for it. Even though it should be a standard, it isn't.
And also coming up, Leadworks are having their second Halloween game tournament. Do you think you'll participate in that, Dorita?
I might. I have talked to someone about it. I have an idea in the back of my head about some nice game, so I might just participate. If anyone here wants to participate, hit me up. It is not really, you don't have to think about it as a really big competitive tournament. It's more like a game jam with a tiny prize at the end, which is a t-shirt if they like your stuff. And everybody who participates gets a sticker, so don't be in there for the prizes, be in there to get acquainted with the tech if you want to, if you want to make art for a game, that's what you are there for. And for collaboration. This is more about collaboration than it is about competition.
Yeah, so if anybody's going to participate, let us know, because we'd love to talk about that during the show, and highlight stuff that people are doing. It'd be really cool. Also happening at some point, I don't know when, I don't think a date has been announced yet, but 7-Day FPS looks like it's going to be getting some kind of announcement very soon, which I'll probably be participating in.
Yes, I had my eye on that, but I guess if that conflicts with this game jam, I'm probably going for the Leadworks game jam simply because there's more time in it.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Do you participate in game jams at all, Levi?
No, I generally either have other stuff going on or, I usually have something conflicting. And I'm married, so it's kind of tough.
A bit harder.
Justify, like hanging out for a whole weekend, like ignoring my wife and cats.
You can't ignore your wife, you can't ignore the cats for too long. They will let you know, instantly.
Mine just walked in the room, he's all, feed me, damn it.
So, talking about cats means we are near the end of the podcast.
Very close.
So let's talk about crowdfunding items.
I been taking a bit of a look at a HMD that's currently being crowdfunded, which looks kind of interesting. It's got a lot more processing on board than some of the other HMDs that we've seen recently, and they're doing Linux support, which is kind of nice. Another thing that they've got that's interesting compared to other up-and-coming HMDs is that it's got onboard positional tracking. So rather than having something that sits on your desk and talks via IR to the headset to work out what orientation your head has and what position your head has, it's got all that onboard on the device so that you're not quite so tied to a desk.
That's kind of what I want from an HMD. What are the tech specs? They're talking about 1080p, which haven't we kind of established that this is a bit too low?
I think it's a decent starting point,
And what is the price tag they are aiming at? Are they going to compete with Oculus?
Well, the dev kit starts at $400, so it's very close to the Oculus price point at the moment. I don't know what their plans are for retail price once it hits the market, though. So yeah, it's got 2 cameras on board. It's got a OLED display like the Oculus DK2. It's got built-in audio stuff, which is again different from a couple other HMDs. So they've got this built-in earbuds that, looking at the video, they don't look that comfortable, but I'm sure that they've come up with something that that works.
I hate earbuds.
I can't stand them either.
Feels like I have a tumor sticking out of my ears.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like something nice and soft that just leaves my ear floating in space and shoots sound at it. And so they're going to be supporting Linux. If that sort of stuff's interesting, check it out. Looks like it's going to be lighter than the Oculus Rift DK2 and a little bit smaller along the side. Slightly deeper, I think. And it totally looks like it has a face on it, and that's what everybody wants in a HMD, right?
Yes, you care about that most of all.
Yes, that is the most important thing.
Actually, I thought it was a nice innovation that they put cameras on the front, finally, so that you can switch on the front cameras and see what you're doing.
That's the biggest problem I have with the Rift, is that there's no way to take it off without putting it down. You can't sit it up on your forehead, it's just too heavy.
Isn't, I guess, the Samsung VR thingy with the Galaxy Note 4 is kind of going in the same direction with the camera on the outside of the phone? I actually think that is going to be one of the easiest way to get into decent enough VR in the meantime, because if you upgrade your phone plan, you might just get this subsidized with your plan.
Yeah.
I know it's awful, but...
Phone plans.
Yeah, phone plans are awful, but this is value added for me, considering that.
Yeah, fair enough. So it looks like they're planning to do Unreal, Unity, Havoc Vision, whatever that is, and CryEngine support out of the box. But yeah, I'm gonna kind of try and keep an eye on what these guys are doing. There are a few HMDs that I'm trying to stay up with. Be interesting to see how the market evolves.
It's nice to see that it is actually evolving for a change and not stagnating like it did before Oculus came around and kicked everybody in the pants.
Yeah. It's even there are still challenges, like, because I've seen lots of people go, well, we've got Oculus. Why do we care about this other thing? Not quite recognizing that for one company to have the keys is not necessarily the most positive thing that we can have.
That is true, especially after the Facebook buyout. Some people are more worried than before.
But unless anybody had anything else they wanted to add, you take that as a no. That has been yet another SteamLUG Cast. Thank you both very much for joining us. Thanks, Levi, for giving up some of your Friday evening to spend with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That's been our pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
And I'm sure we'll see more of you back in IRC and in amongst the community.
I do imagine so.
Remember that you can send us feedback via cast@steamlug.org. You can find us on Twitter @SteamLUG, or you can, hit us up at in IRC, the #SteamLUG IRC channel on Freenode. And you can try sending us telepathic messages. We might get those, we might not. Signal interference is a bit tricky at the moment.
You can try if you're Delana Troy, if you know what I mean.
If you're a Betazoid.
Not all of them. No Luxana Troy, please. She's obnoxious.
Dear. Alright, on that note, we're done here. Thank you very much.
See ya, everybody.
See you later.
Bye!